Hey guys, George here from the F1 Chronicle, and we had an amazing race in Canada this week, and I really enjoyed it. And I think as well, the important thing for me is that it really proved why we need to go racing in the wet in Formula One. And I say that because Formula One has a real habit of running under the safety car when it's too wet, delaying the starts of the race when it's too wet, and it's very frustrating for us fans at home, but even more frustrating for the fans at the circuit. Now, of course, there are some conditions that you can't run in. I mean, think of Zandvoort last year when it absolutely tipped it down. Think of Spa a couple of years ago when we didn't even really have a race. It can be too wet to run, and the reason why that is the case is not because of the grip levels. The Pirelli tyres, the full wet tyres, can clear, I think it's something like 100 litres of water a second. Now, you think about how big 100 litres of water, think of a litre, right? A litre. Scale it up 100 times. You think about that much water being thrown out by the cars every single second. And that's when they're at full speed, of course, 200 miles an hour or so. You think about that amount of water and what that's going to do to the visibility. The only thing I can compare it to, and it's not really that much of a comparison, but the only thing I can compare that to is when you're driving on the motorway or the highway or whatever you want to call it, a fast road, where a lot of big lorries, big trucks are absolutely throwing up spray when it's raining, when it's heavy rain. You can't see, it's like a fog, and frankly, it's scary. That's at 70 miles an hour on a road where cars have got headlights and it's, and there's defined lanes and things like that. You scale it up to Formula One where these cars don't have headlights, they don't have brake lights, they've got the little light at the back for the ERS, but that's about it. That's not always on. And at the speeds these guys are doing, that's not really particularly helpful, because by the time you realise that someone is braking in front of you, it's too late. You've smashed into the back of them. These cars are going the length of a football pitch every second at full speed. So that's why we can't go racing in some wet conditions. But there are some times when it's like we need to go racing. We need to go racing. There's no reason why things should be held up. And the Canadian Grand Prix start was perfect for that, because it was pretty much a full wet track at the start. As the Haas cars proved, they started on the full wet tyre and they made up loads of places. They were the fastest cars on the track, despite not having the fastest car by any means. But then it slowly evolved into intermediates, and then it went dry, and then it went intermediates, and then it went dry again. And that really showcased how good wet weather running is in Formula One. It's necessary. It levels the playing field. It brings in drivers that don't normally do that well. It really does show the talent of these drivers in the wet. And yes, we had Max Verstappen winning, of course, which is a bit predictable, but Lando Norris in his McLaren was the fastest car on the track before he'd had a poorly timed pit stop and went further down. We had different leaders. We had Russell, Norris and Verstappen leading at different points. We had 3 different drivers on the podium. Those 3 drivers I just mentioned. We had different lines being used because of that. Racing in the wet in Formula One is fantastic, and it should never be stopped. And I feel like the FIA has gone a bit too careful on this in some circumstances. There are some times when it does feel as though the drivers really need to get going and get racing. I feel, obviously they have to be safe and feel safe to be able to race, but this is Formula One. This is Grand Prix racing. They don't stop for the rain. Yes, sometimes they have to, unfortunately, because it's so wet, but there are times, like Canada showed, where they should just let the drivers race. And we had a proper start as well. We didn't have a start underneath the safety car or anything like that. And we had no stoppages for the weather, no red flags. So we had clean running throughout. Yes, some safety car periods and stuff for some mistakes. But again, that again shows the talent. I mean, drivers like Logan Sargent, who I don't really want to pick on too much, but drivers like Logan Sargent, who frankly aren't as talented as some of the others, he had a horrible day because he just couldn't hack it in the wet. So that again, it sorts out the average from the great. So, yeah, that's my take on it. I really enjoyed the Canadian Grand Prix. What do you guys think about it? Let us know in the comments below. And, of course, keep it tuned here to the F1 Chronicle for much more content just like this.